For 15 years, people have been making Minecraft waterfalls the wrong way. Almost every other aspect of building has seen massive changes and revolutions in how they're done, and yet a waterfall from 2010 is practically indistinguishable from one now. The fact is, Minecraft waterfalls just look bad. And while plenty of people have tried to fix them, all they end up doing are small changes that never really get to the heart of the problem. So I've set about redesigning Minecraft waterfalls from the ground up, and while that might sound complicated, the waterfall design method I use only involves a few small steps and completely changing the way we think about Minecraft waterfalls. But first, we need to talk about why Minecraft waterfalls never look realistic. The first thing you notice is color. Water in Minecraft is a deep, clear blue. This is obviously unrealistic, as running, or white water, is, well, white. In real life, this is determined by something called turbulent and laminar flow. Laminar flow is when all of the water molecules are moving parallel to each other, and occurs in water without many obstacles and drops. Turbulent flow is when the water molecules are moving chaotically, forming eddies and small currents. These occur when there are obstructions in a waterway or drops, as gravity will cause turbulent flow in most waterfalls, and more turbulent flow occurs where the waterfall lands in the water. Laminar flow water is usually clear, and you can see the slight blue color water naturally has. However, turbulent flow causes small air bubbles to mix with the water, which makes it look white. This white color is most pronounced in waterfalls and large rapids, which both have a lot of turbulent flow and aeration. Thus, waterfalls tend to be white, though a waterfall might have some color at the top, where the water is transitioning between laminar and turbulent flow. Now, the spray from a waterfall is something people represent in Minecraft, often using glass or cobwebs. However, this is far less noticeable in real life, and it is often used in Minecraft just to provide some interest to an otherwise boring and unrealistic dark blue pillar. This can be entirely avoided, however, by just changing how we build the main waterfall itself, which will incorporate some effects of spray without being too noticeable and focusing on making the waterfall itself realistic. We'll use a few different tricks to do this, but the first is using glass instead of water. Because real-life waterfalls are white, we can just use white stained glass. Additionally, this lets us mix in some blue glass at the top, and lets us make full use of the main advantage of glass. It's transparent. What this allows us to do is use different blocks behind the glass to create a more realistic waterfall, while still keeping the overall white surface. However, we'll talk about this more later. The second advantage of glass is that it lets us blend in different blocks. Glass comes in a variety of colors, so we can blend darker shades of glass with lighter ones to create a more realistic effect. Finally, glass is far more versatile than water. Whereas water needs a source block and then flows straight down from there, with glass you can just place individual blocks. It makes plunge waterfalls, where the water arcs out from the cliff face, possible. It means you no longer have to worry about the water freezing. It also makes complex shapes and specific details far easier, as you don't have to worry about planning where source blocks and water flow will go. Finally, water only comes in one block, while glass has more options. For example, you can use glass panes to break up smooth surfaces, and blend the waterfall into rock, and mix in end rods to add interest. However, the second, and arguably more important part of using glass, are the blocks we place behind the glass, and we'll get to that in the demonstration. Now that we have the basic idea, we're going to try to expand on this and create a more realistic waterfall from the ground up, tying in some more strategies to make the waterfall look even more lifelike. The first step is to plan out your waterfall. I like to just make a rough sketch with a pencil first, just to figure out the overall shape of the waterfall. There are many types of waterfalls you can make, but there are a few things in general to consider. The first is whether the waterfall will consist of multiple tiers, like this one here. If it will have multiple, sketch out the rough levels and pools of the waterfall. The second thing to consider is the overall shape. Some waterfalls are more rectangular and blocky, like this one in Iceland. However, this one is more inspired by something you might see on the US East Coast, so it'll be narrower, but still have a lot of water flowing through it. Also, I want it to flow slightly to the right to give it more interest. Now that I have the general levels in, I can take a moment to try and block out the general shape of the waterfall. In this case, I'm just using some temporary stone to show where it will go. Additionally, notice how the waterfall goes slightly to the right, and then lands on an uneven level that flows off to the left, which makes it more interesting. Another thing to consider is how the waterfall ends. In this case, the main fall ends with a smaller fall, and then ends at this larger pool. In most cases, waterfalls will carve out a basin or pool at their base, which also allows us to more easily show the foam and connect it to a stream. However, smaller waterfalls may just continue into a stream, especially if they are on steeper slopes that have a lot more smaller waterfalls. Next, we're going to try and plan out where the water will go, just using white glass. Since we just have a rough frame, we can fill in exactly where the water is actually going to flow. This is made a lot easier with a drawing beforehand, especially for more complex waterfalls. When doing this, it's generally good to keep a few things in mind. The first is that water often takes a simple path down a cliff face, While it can flow down in interesting patterns, these will tend to get worn down over time as the waterfall returns to just a straight downward direction. The second is that while water will generally take a more simple path, there is no reason not to make some interesting but realistic features. One of the most common are small splits in the waterfall. Here, I made a small diversion just to make the waterfall more interesting. Just know that the waterfalls with a shallower angle will generally be more likely to split into parts. You can also add slight turns or variations, like I did at the bottom of this one. While it would eventually be weathered away by the water, it is simple enough to still be a common sight on waterfalls like this one. The next step is to fill in behind and around the glass with a place-holding block like stone. While this might not be the final block, it will work well enough for now. When doing this, there are a few things to keep in mind. The first is that water always takes the path of least resistance. What this means is that if your waterfall is on a slight angle, like this one, there should be a ledge of sorts that prevents it from just going straight down. The same can be seen here, where this small ledge stops the water from going straight over. Also, if your waterfall splits, there should be a protrusion or some other reason for it. If the split goes all the way to the top, there should be a rock or boulder that sticks out past water level and blocks it. However, the split will not be very large or significant, so I'm just going to use shading to imply the presence of a slight ridge or protrusion here. Now, before I move on to the main part of this process, I would really appreciate it if you consider subscribing. It's completely free for you and only takes a few seconds of your time, and will make sure you get updated on further videos and helps to support my channel. And to the many of you who have subscribed or watch other videos, thank you for your support. It helps me immensely, and I hope it has given some value to you as well. Now, back to building. Next is one of the most important parts of making a realistic waterfall, though there are some more tips you can use to polish it off. This is the use of different colors behind the glass to create shading and add a more realistic water effect. The key thing to consider in this instance is how the water and rock behind it interact, and there are two main things that affect shading. The first is the fact that water will darken the rock around the waterfall. Thus, you should make a gradient to a darker color where the waterfall is, bearing in mind that this water is often from spray. To do this, consider where the spray will be. For example, here I have a shorter gradient at the top and a wider gradient at the bottom to simulate how spray will come from the bottom. Note, however, the color directly next to the fall is the same in both instances, as these are both directly next to the falling water. The second and more important detail to consider is that water is white in front of dark stone, so where there is more water flowing, the color will be lighter. This is because how much the dark stone shows through depends on how much water is in front of it. So, you can show how much water is flowing in a certain area by changing the color. This is how I made the illusion of a ridge. By using dark blocks behind it, it makes the water appear to flow around it. Now, there are a few things to keep in mind when doing this. The first is that you can use this to show channels in the waterfall. Especially with slightly sloped waterfalls, you can follow the natural contours of a slope and make certain areas with more water lighter. You can see this on the waterfall here, as this chute where the water is concentrated is lighter. The second thing to keep in mind is that waterfalls are never even. With a straight downward plunge, there will be natural unevenness in the lip of the waterfall, so certain parts will be darker. Because the water is falling straight down, these will often manifest as dark and light streaks that fall down the length of the waterfall, as you can see here. Also note that as the water falls, it will spread out, so these streaks even out and grow less obvious as the water falls. Additionally, this makes the waterfall slightly darker at the bottom as the water dissipates. However, waterfalls tend to get lighter at the bottom due to spray. Most of this is created where the water hits a ledge or the pool and will make the colors lighter and more even. You can simulate this both by putting intersped glass blocks in panes in front of the waterfall, or by just making the base colors lighter and more similar. Personally, I like to combine both in small quantities to achieve this effect. However, make sure that unless there is a lot of water or it falls very far, there is not too much spray. Finally, consider the interaction between the edge of the waterfall and the cliff. If it is gradual, like with straight down waterfalls, they will most likely blend together. Also, consider that spray will spread out. I like to add some white or light gray stained glass to the edges, especially to softer waterfalls, to simulate the spreading out. Also, you can make this effect wider and more prominent at the base to simulate spray spreading out from the main waterfall. Finally, I want to touch on some tips to help add movement and make the waterfall look even better. First, you can use glass panes to help add depth and movement to the waterfall. As you can see here, I made the glass into streaks that are more recessed where the waterfall is darker, which helps to show the larger amount of water flowing through the lighter areas. Also, you can use it at the top of waterfalls with a smooth lip that falls off relatively evenly, like you can see here. If there are any obstructions, you can use the full blocks around them, simulating how the water will rise up slightly as it goes around it. With these smoother waterfalls, the water will often be laminar until after it falls over the edge. Thus, I like to add some cyan or blue stained glass or colored blocks behind the glass to show the color of the water before it falls off. Finally, you can add things like trapdoors, snow layers, carpets, or candles to the edges or basins of waterfalls to get a more prominent white color and to add depth. In fact, you can even add campfires and a trapdoor or something similar above it to help stop the smoke at a certain point, to add movement and visual interest to the waterfall. And of course, feel free to use reference images or change these tips in whatever way you prefer. Now, while these techniques are more specific to waterfalls, I also have a video on another rarely used Minecraft technique that can seriously improve your building skills, especially with larger builds. So click up here to watch that now.